Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of There's Still Time, the AFTN Soccer Show, broadcasting on CITR Radio 101.9 FM from the unceded Musqueam Territory at the University of beautiful British Columbia. I'm Michael McCall.
And I'm Zachary Adam Eisenhower.
And we're joined by a special guest this week. For the first couple of parts of the show, we're going to introduce you to somebody that I'm sure many of you will have read on the AFTN website. He does our match previews. He's a student up at UBC. He presents a show on CITR Radio as well. Welcome to the AFTN Soccer Show, Jake McGrail.
Thank you for having me.
We've wanted to have you on the show for a long time, Jake, and I don't know why I haven't actually had you on before now, but we've got you on now. You're going to be with us for the first couple of parts as we chat MLS. But for anyone that is unfamiliar with your work and who you are, just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I'm a student at the university, as you call it, of beautiful British Columbia. I'm in my fourth year English major. I am part of the sports collective at CITR Radio, which covers UBC Thunderbirds athletics specifically. And I've become the coordinator of the collective this school year, which has been a lot of fun, even though the athletics have been canceled. I started writing match previews for the AFTN site back the beginning of the 2018 season, which I had to double check that. It was actually further back than I remember. I would have guessed 2019, but it's been a few years. And I felt I should bring one fun Whitecaps related fact to the table. So I was one of the younger people who carried the flags onto the field for the home playoff match against Portland back in 2015. So that was the one time that I was actually on the pitch at BC Place.
That was a game we all remember, but not for the right reasons. But you at least remember it for some positive reasons.
Yeah, so that was the best part of the night for me.
We had a tifo that night. That was meaningful to me because we made it with the players' wives, but. Yeah, you're right. That was the 2-0 loss after the goalless draw away in Portland where Gershon Kofi played the 10.
Yeah, that was Kikuta's injury game, and yeah. But yeah, that's a lovely memory to have from that. I never got to do anything like that as a kid or a youth, and it's like I kind of wish I had. It would have been just something to look back on and go, oh, that'd been fantastic. I mean, that's one thing the Whitecaps do really well, I think, is like integrate kids and stuff into the community and do all that stuff. But I mean, we've got you on the show in a week where there hasn't actually been much Whitecap stuff to talk about. So yeah, we thought, who is good at having shows when there's not a lot to talk about? The guy that's doing all the college stuff when there's not much to talk about. So let's get Jake on the show for this. But there is some stuff in Whitecapsland that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about MLS stuff in general. Next part, we're going to focus a bit on Montreal because they've been very, very busy this off-season, and there's a lot of things happening out east with that. But for this part, we're going to kick things off with the Whitecaps. Before doing this show, I went on the Whitecaps website, and I was curious because I thought it seems an even quieter week than usual. I wanted to know how many news stories were actually on the official Whitecaps site this week. 7. In the last 7 days since we did the show, there's been 7 news stories. Out of those, 1 is on the Canadian women's national team, 1 was on the MLS transfer window dates, and one was a Black History Month video with Theo Bair that was excellent. Then there was 2 stories on the new Chief Revenue Officer, and very little on the actual team, which is unsurprising because very little is happening with the actual team just now. But there is a new signing of sorts. He's already known to be at the club, but it's now official that he's signed an MLS deal, and that is first round draft pick Javane Brown, the Jamaican under 21. He's a 21-year-old Jamaican right back. He signed off his own accord in the MLS deal, just to get my old joke in that I have to do with Jamaican players. An MLS deal that's taken him through to club options to 2024. And by all accounts, he is a great prospect. He's been capped at senior level for Jamaica, as we talked about. He's been capped at youth levels for Jamaica. And he had signed a USL deal with Atlanta too. And if the Whitecaps hadn't offered him an MLS deal, he could have just walked and gone and played USL this season. So I think all in all, it's been a good addition. Let's kick things off with Jake as our newbie on the show. It's hard to know much about him because we're only going on videos and what we read and college scouting and stuff like that. I'm genuinely excited by both him and Egbo and what they can offer the team this season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on NCAA soccer players, but really the part that stood out for me was I thought it was interesting that both the draft picks they signed, Brown and Egbo, needed international spots. So that must show some level of confidence within the organization that there is something that they're going to be able to get out of the 2 of them, because burning 2 international spots on rookies could be a bit of a gamble if they just don't end up being played at all.
It's a huge gamble, and it's something you don't see a lot of clubs doing, especially because of how tight a commodity the international slots are. Probably even more so now with the new young player rule that's coming in, that we'll come to in a little bit as well. But that's a very good point. They both take up international spots. There's now just 1 free slot internationally left on the Whitecaps roster, and you have to think that's going to be going to this number 10 if we ever do get the number 10, Zach. But, I mean, Brown, capped with Jamaica, then came over, went the college route. He does seem a good prospect. It's a guy now that we've got somebody that can challenge Jake Nerwinski. I think Jake has needed that to help maybe take his game to the next level. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see him called on and used early on in this season, I think, with the game's going to be coming thick and fast.
Yeah, we've talked a lot in the past about how Jake is a serviceable MLS player, but he is not a top-tier right back in MLS, at least to this point. And yeah, they either need to improve or they need to have other options. And it appears that Brown is going to be that other option, or at least one of them. In terms of, like we've talked about before, and like Jake said, yeah, I'm also not an expert on Brown's NCAA career. Seen some of the highlights and stuff and whatever. But the thing that stands out to me goes back to how we talked about this when they were drafted, of how people should probably have low expectations of draft picks. Now the Whitecaps have signed both of these players, or two of their 4 draft picks. It's really, really interesting, and I wonder how this is going to play out, because again, as you go into the season, I think you have to have low expectations for these players, and it already feels like both of them have quite significant roles to play in the team. And that is shown by the fact that they've signed them before actually being in a camp or being in a preseason or anything like that. So it's got to be one thing. I think one of 2 things is probably going to happen. They're going to look like really good. Like DeSantis and the crew are going to look really good because they signed them early and they got them done and they contribute. Or they're going to look maybe a little bit foolish that they signed draft picks so quickly. And then ultimately, I think if it does end up in that latter category, it's just they're gonna use the pandemic to say, hey, we had to build a squad and move forward and all that kind of stuff. But I'm apprehensive about about the signing of both players before they've been with the squad.
I think some of what you mentioned with the people looking at them already as these big new additions coming in is just because there really haven't been any other new additions. So when you're looking at how is the team being improved, I believe it's only 4 currently new additions. Those two, Saicedo and then Evan Newton, but a backup goalie isn't really going to be doing much. So if you're looking at who's going to be coming in, doing new stuff, potentially adding more, you have to look at those two.
Yeah, but then when you break down those 4, like 3 of them you would think of as being backups, but those 3 backups are all probably, especially Egbo and Newton, going to get considerable minutes if Canada's international players are away and the other guys are away on international duty. But yeah, to sign them before actually seeing them in the environment and kick a ball, I mean, part of that is you're taking a little bit of the motivation away from them at training camp, just in a small regard, because it's like they've got their deal now. They're not having to play to earn a deal. Obviously, they're playing to earn a place in either the starting 11 or the game day 18 or 20 or whatever it's going to be now. It's unusual. It makes me think, though, are they signing these guys because they know that they're here and they've got them and they're struggling to get other players to come in because of quarantine, because of the pandemic rules and everything that's going on? Are they thinking, look, we just need to get some guys on the roster because we're going to be short of players. These guys are here. Let's get them now.
Well, that's what it feels like. And that, again, and we live in the different times, as you would say, Michael. But these desperate or desperation, might be, too unkind to them.
Yeah.
But it's got to be at least, it might pay off and they might look great and that's okay. But in the moment, it feels a little awkward.
I do think the Whitecaps recruiting pitch at the moment is not as good as it usually is, given all the uncertainty, even just where they're going to be playing. Like, if you're trying to recruit someone and you're telling them we're not actually going to be playing in Vancouver, we don't know where we're going to be playing, where you're going to have to move, what the restrictions are going to be like, whether you can bring your family with you, all that kind of stuff, that makes it even more difficult to try and recruit people right now.
Yeah, we spoke with Axel on last week's show. It's a thankless task that they've got just now. So if you've got a couple of young guys that look good potential, get them signed up and just see how it goes. You've got a chance to make further additions in the summer. Hopefully by then you'll know if there's going to be any games in Canada and everything like that. Hopefully some more additions will be coming, but I guess we'll have to kind of wait and see about that. There was another addition, though, this week. It was in the front office. Now, Peter Hicken had wrote on the AFTN site an article on like MLS Moneyball. And it looks like the Caps are going all in on that because they've raided the Oakland Athletics baseball team, appointed Wade Martin as Chief Revenue Officer. He'll also kind of play a role in the senior sort of leadership group of the club as well. Now, when he was at Oakland, he was tasked with growing all revenue streams, including corporate partnerships, hospitality, premium experiences, broadcast and digital media. Now, a lot of that just now, if he's tasked with that at Vancouver, that's a tough thing to come to a new gig when you can't get people to come to the stadium and to try and grow revenue. So, they must have offered something as a good incentive, or he liked the challenge, because that, to give up a job where you've got all those existing partnerships, to come to a foreign country during a pandemic where you're not hosting home games and being tasked to grow revenue, that's a tall order.
I mean, the Whitecaps hiring someone from the Oakland A's really allows the jokes to write themselves, at least in terms of the ownership spending.
Sadly, it does. I'm sure Zach will comment on that.
Well, I don't know if it was you or Steve who was messaging me about. Oh, it was Steve. Steve messaged us, and Steve said, "Yeah, look, they hired a guy from an organization that's known for what's the language Steve used? Not penny pinching, but who are known to not pay their players when they become good, not to pay their players well." So yeah.
Yeah, but by all accounts, what he did at Oakland was excellent, and he really grew the revenue there, and he had 3 years there, and he did an excellent job. So excited to see what he does, really, in terms of corporate partnerships. It'd be nice if the first thing he did was get rid of Bell and get somebody else in light of everything that's been happening with Bell, but don't really see that happening for the foreseeable future. There's no word as to whether he can play the number 10 role, but fingers crossed that he could be called upon if needed. That could be our big international signing that we've brought in to fill that number 10 slot. Because there's still no movement on that. Now, on last week's show, Axel basically said, look, we're still in talks with Otavio. He might still come, and things might change in the summer. That might be also more just wishful thinking on Axel's part, because Otavio seems to have made it quite known he doesn't really seem to have any interest in coming to MLS. But then MDS was speaking to Portuguese media this week and also was waxing lyrical about Otavio as well. Whether they're just wanting to put the feelers out there to let it get back to the player and the agent that, look, we really love you, we really covet you, we really want you to come here. I'm hoping they're not putting all their eggs in that basket, because it's not looking great. And then if he is the guy that they're going to end up getting, he's not coming to July probably.
Yeah, the whole potential around this number 10, it seems like it's playing out the way it has in the past, which is just really sad. I remember earlier in this offseason, Michael, you were so excited after conversations with individuals and with things you were hearing and with people being linked. Like there was optimism.
I think you did tell me to look at history.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to say that to say I told you so, but in the moment, this also does not feel great, right? And again, pandemic. There's legitimate reasons, but you have to get something done of quality, and I think Mark DeSantos is still waiting for that to get done, right? For that to be able to really shape and define his 2021 squad.
I mean, it's the never-ending cycle, really. The Whitecaps and the mythical number 10 that'll solve, well, not all the problems, but solve a lot of problems, at least offensively. So there's not really much you can add at this point besides just agreeing that, yes, there is a big hole where you would like to see a big-time designated player. And unless you have that next-level caliber type player, I mean, preferably more than one, but as things stand, we would be very happy to at least have one. Without that, there's kind of a ceiling on the team.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is. And, like, obviously, Jake, this is the first time you've been on the show, so we've not had a chance to speak to you about your thoughts on the team. You've made comments about the team last year in your match previews and various things like that. So let's just get your thoughts on, well, first of all, last season. What did you make of the team? Obviously, it's a season that was in 3 parts, really. Towards the end, down the stretch, they showed glimpses, and that's what Axel and MDS are holding up. Those last 6 games where they had 4 wins and they didn't let in many goals and stuff like that, that is basically the start of what we're expected to see now in 2021. But, I mean, what did you make of what you saw last season?
I mean, when I went back a little bit earlier, look at the standings, look at the schedule, the individual games, just to refresh my mind, what I saw was actually a little bit better than what I'd remembered. I feel like it's really the 2 losses to Toronto back in August when they were just absolutely killed that just kind of got seared into my mind. And it never really shook that, because they also had that the run at the start of the US portion of the final schedule where they were also just getting waxed by like LAFC, Seattle, which then led into the run of improved form. But it's hard to shake that stuff, like considering how similar it was to 2019 as well, in the super rough summer that the club went through then. But I mean, I guess you can hold on to the improvement they showed at the end of the season. I'm not sure how much of that is transferable over and how likely it is to revert back into what it was like earlier in the season last year.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing is, other clubs are going to have improved over the off-season. And right now, we have not really seen a big improvement in that Vancouver roster. Tied in with that, if anything, it's got worse because Freddie Montero's moved on, and he was a guy that played such a prominent role in a number of those good games and good performances, and the link-up play with Dahomey and Cava and stuff like that. So, I mean, watching the off-season play out, and obviously there is genuinely reasons that things haven't been done. From the CBA and not even knowing if the league was starting, to everything around quarantine now, we're getting players back here. And then it's like, where they're going to be starting the season. All that stuff has made it difficult. And it's not an excuse. It is a reality. But as you've sat and watched this off-season play out in Vancouver, elsewhere, what have you made of things?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, lost Montero. That's the biggest loss from last season's team. Also lost now Milinkovic, which was kind of expected, and Bush, which was also kind of expected. And we mentioned earlier, there's 3 or 4 new players that have come in, but really it's basically the same team as last year. So there are pieces there. And as mentioned, they showed some life at the end of last season. But if you look up and down the roster page, I'm just thinking, okay, like I don't think there's anyone that's going to be looking at the Whitecaps roster that they have as things stand right now and getting like really excited about the potential of the team to be more than like fringe playoff maybe.
So Jake, where we are right now, how does it make you feel about the comments as the season was ending? You had comments, I believe, from both the head coach and Axel saying we're not that far away. We're not that far away from where we want to be. If it was just for, kind of like not missing the guys in Orlando and a couple of things not going away, we would have been where we wanted to be. Do you have confidence in where they're at right now with the very little amount that they've done and the failure to do the one significant thing that they said they were going to do and wanted to do?
Well, I guess it's the confidence in terms of what exactly are you expecting out of this team? Because if you're thinking like how confident are you that they're going to be able to get home field advantage in the playoffs? Not confident as things stand. I'd say I'm confident they won't be like absolute basement. I'm somewhat confident that they might be able to make the playoffs as things stand, but there's a lot more room to go back down than a lot further up.
I've got low expectations right now. Now, obviously, a lot can change. I just feel these first couple of months are going to be very, very tough.
Yeah, I'm definitely very concerned about the possibility of a bad start to the season.
Yeah.
Your interview with Axel last week really emphasized all the issues the club is facing with the players are going to be missing a lot of training camp, whole problem of relocating everything to the US. And as a big fan of the Toronto Raptors, who are having to play this whole NBA season out of Tampa Bay, I've already watched this type of thing play out from a fan perspective, and they got off to a terrible start to the season. It was lost 8 of their first 10, I believe. They only just got back to 500 after like 20 more games. Some of that has to do with the roster. Like I didn't expect going to the season they would be amazing, but I also didn't expect them to get off to as poor of a start as they did. And I think the whole setup of never really being at home and having to deal with all of this off the court, off the field stuff is a massive deal.
I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like. I think if it was me, I'd be unsettled as well for a good few weeks or months. And it does explain why at the start of the American thing last year, the Whitecaps did struggle off the gate before they started to get a run of games at home in Portland and then just get used to everything that was going on. Right now, the way that the roster looks, it's a scary thought. Obviously, the schedule's still to come out. Fingers crossed. I kind of want us to start with games out against Eastern teams, really, just because if we're dropping points in the early games, it's not going to Western Conference rivals. But at the same time, I don't know that I want the team flying around all over the US either during this time. I don't know. But I mean, training camp is set to get underway for all teams on March 1st. So next Monday, basically. Now, the new quarantine rules come into effect in Canada from this Monday, which is 3 days in a hotel, then the rest of your time, if you've tested negative, quarantining at home. So by that measure, you're kind of hoping and expecting that all the Whitecaps players will be back in Vancouver by Sunday, the 21st at the latest, which will be the day that this show comes out. Now, Evan Newton, we're recording this show on Saturday the 20th, so Evan Newton on Instagram shared something today that he's flying to Vancouver today, so he's fine. Ali Adnan shared a photo of him in a swimming pool that certainly did not look like Vancouver. Now, it could be an old photo. He might be flying home on Sunday, but I'm thinking if he isn't flying home on Sunday, then we've got issues then with his quarantine. And I haven't stalked the rest of the players. I leave that to our good friend Har. She's been doing that and just letting me know what's been happening on Instagram with all the players. So she sent me those today. But, I mean, that's a genuine concern. How many players are you going to have in camp? Then you're going to lose a big chunk of them because of international games at the end of the month. The MLS announced that the transfer window now is going to run from March 10th to June 1st. So there's still a lot of time to get business done. And it might be a case that there's going to be players that just want to wait to see what's happening, to see how the Whitecaps setup is, if it is in Utah, what that's like, get feedback about all of that. But, I mean, overall, there's a lot of concerns there. And best case scenario is they just hang in as best as they can for the first 2 months and then hopefully move on from that.
Yeah, that's not obviously the way you want to go into any season, regardless if it's in a regular one. But it also doesn't seem like that sits well like with the roster. You know what I mean? It's not like it doesn't feel like they're gonna be able to do that. The flip side of the coin, the maybe more positive perspective is MLS is a league that we've seen a number of teams over the years do that. Have a really, really poor beginning, and then go out and do well, get a good playoff seed, even home advantage, and win things.
Seattle's done it a few times.
I was going to say, Michael's favorite team to celebrate with is known for doing that. So, but I can't. It's hard to imagine Vancouver doing that.
One thing which could shake up a number of teams, we'll just finish this part with just a little chat about this, is the MLS young player rule, which in typical MLS fashion hasn't been finalised yet, as we're like 5 or 6 weeks away from the start of the season. Sam Stechel on The Athletic had an interesting breakdown of it. And this is just things that sources at club have told him. So none of this is 100% official, but a number of clubs are confirming that this is likely what it's going to be, with the caveat that things could still change over the next 6 weeks. This young player rule that's coming in, it does seem to be the next big important rule in MLS. You had the designated player rule that came in after Beckham. Then there's the whole TAM and then even GAM stuff, but basically the TAM stuff, the TAM player, that was probably the next big thing. And then this is taking it to the next level to try and attract young talent to the league with a view of selling it on, making lots of money, etc., etc. What the Whitecaps are always talking about, what they want to do. Brief breakdown of what the young player rule is. Players still have to be under the age of 23 at the end of their first season in the league. So you can't sign a 22-year-old that's going to turn 23 during the season. If they stay in the league until they're 25, they will keep this young player's tag. So they'll be allowed to be classed as a young player if they're in the league for, say, 3 seasons or whatever. Salary-wise, it could range from anything from, the feeling is the lower end will be 150 to 200,000, but with a ceiling of 612,500. That will be their maximum salary.
I've got a feeling.
Now, this is where things get a little weird. Who can clubs sign? So, if clubs currently have 3 designated players over the age of 23, they're only allowed to add 1 young player signing. If clubs have a designated player under the age of 23, they can have 3 young player signings. Clubs, though, can buy down their designated players using TAM to get them off the designated player rule so that they can then add extra young players. Now, if you look at the Whitecaps, we've only got 2 designated players right now, but assuming the third comes in, the number 10, you have to think he's going to be over the age of 23. So that would be 3 designated players over the age of 23. So if the Caps don't buy any of them down with TAM, then you've got the problem of they can only have 1 young player, which might be size 0 for all we know, because we're not 100% sure what he's fitting into. So right now they've got Cava, who's 28, 53-year-old Ali Adnan, and then however old the number 10 player is. Homegrowns and draft picks can also sign to a young player deal, and current players can be grandfathered to kind of fit it if you've got a talented young player under the age of 23. I think it was MDS, when I spoke to him a few weeks back, said, if you look around the league though, how many actual young players are performing? You've got Rossi and maybe 1 or 2 others, but on the whole, these aren't the guys that's your top performers in the league. And then I broke it down, and you look at the top goal scorers and the top assist getters, and they're all in the like high 20s, low 30 age range. I think this is likely to affect how clubs now sign designated players. So they're either going to go big on the older guys, TFC kind of route, I guess, and go with that and just settle with 1 young designated player or 1 young player, whatever you want to call this. Or you might have clubs like the Whitecaps that are trying to put all their eggs in the young player basket and try and get all this young talent in the hope that one of them kind of rises to the occasion. Now, that's a lot of info I've just put out there for us to quickly unpack, but let's start with Jake.
Well, MLS just continues to outdo itself, really.
Yeah, I mean, as I explained that, I'm thinking, man, I'm making this sound really complicated. Is it really complicated? No, it is really complicated.
I mean, obviously, it might be a little less complicated once they actually get a full deal with this thing hammered out, but it's very funny how many exceptions they're trying to cram in without fundamentally changing the whole salary cap structure, which I guess I get, but as the rate things are going, at a certain point, how many more things can you add before you just have to fully revamp, which would end up probably in a labor dispute. And luckily we don't have many of those in MLS.
There's never been one in their 32 years come 2027. But no, and that's very true. It's like the whole salary structure, it feels it needs blown up, and you're bringing this in, which is a bit convoluted in places. It has the feeling, Zach, of them saying, what would the LA Galaxy like in this case? Let's write the new rule around what the Galaxy would do.
Yeah, maybe too. I mean, yeah, they're known for crafting rules based on certain clubs' needs, for sure. But it also feels like this is also, in some sense, catering to 2 things. One, clubs that don't want to spend on what I would call actual designated players, like over 1.5 million players. But it also, I think, plays into the fact that they know that one of the things that make them sustainable and meaningful for owners is to discover young talent that they can sell on for good value. And so that's what I see in this the most, is those 2 things. It allows you to, show your supporters that you have ambition by signing these new young DPs, essentially. And at the same time, you make the league better off by mining the earth for young, talented players that you can make profit on.
I did think I did think one thing you said, Michael, was pretty interesting about the average or the range of ages of people who actually contribute at a high level in MLS. Because theoretically, you could have 4 21 or 22-year-olds in filling these young player slots combined with the regular designated players. But how many teams are actually going to be spending that money on 3 or 4 21 and 22-year-olds and throwing them all out there in the starting lineup and be like, just go get it?
Mm. It's a gamble. It's like, would you rather spend money on, like, nothing's ever guaranteed in MLS because players struggle to settle and there's lots of different anomalies in this league to other leagues. But on the whole, like, if you go out and make a splash on, say, like a Zlatan or a Drogba, or like even with what TFC have done with like a Bradley, you know what you're getting. You're taking a bit of a gamble if you decide that you want to go down the route of having these 3 young players at the expense of having 3 top-end designated players. If it was me, I'd rather be a club that had 3 good quality older designated players, and you take a punt on one of these guys under this new official rule, and there's nothing to stop you bringing other guys in, and just have to manage the salary cap accordingly.
But that's the thing, Michael. I think many of the owners, a significant number of the owners, don't want to. They feel like there's a risk on those old players as well. As I think is fair.
Well, there is, because you could put, like, you could have signed a Zlatan that got injured for the whole season in the first game, or you could sign a Chicharito who is crap for the whole season, basically. He's motivated for this year, though. I read an article, so
I think what the medium, or the place that the owners have settled on this is saying, look, okay, we know you. We need to have some way to show that we're bringing in good young players, and I think they're going with this approach as opposed to the older established, Zlatans, Wayne Rooney's, those kind of players. I think there's a significant shift for many of the clubs in the league to focus on unearthing, the next Alphonso Davies kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that is the route. And like clubs like Atlanta will probably thrive under this system because they've been fantastic. The way that they've been operating, LA Dwell's another team that seem to get these good young talents in. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how the Whitecaps adapt to this, and we'll see if this does change the league. We might not see a big change in the initial season, maybe even the first couple of seasons, but I think long term this could be an interesting one. Will it make MLS a league of choice for some of these young guys on those salaries? I don't think so, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. But that's it for this part. We talked about there not being too much activity in Whitecapsland. Well, in the next part, we're going to head over to the east of Canada and to a team that has certainly been very active this off-season, the Club Foots of Montreal. We'll be back chatting about that after this.
Hi, I'm Mark Dos Santos, and you're listening to the AFTN Soccer Show.
Welcome back to the AFTN Soccer Show on CITR Radio, 101.9 FM. And kicking off this part is a former Artist of the Month, English band Idols, with a song from their debut album, 2017's Brutalism. That was a song called Exeter. Has the lyrics, will something happen? Will something ever happen? And I think that's maybe what we're feeling a little bit about with the Whitecaps search for a number 10 just now. But while the Whitecaps have been quiet this off-season, the same can certainly not be said for our Eastern Conference foes, Club de Foot Montreal, CF Montreal, the former Impact Montreal. I'm just going to call them Montreal. I think CF Montreal's got a nice ring to it. I might go with that. They've been very busy this off-season. They've rebranded. They've brought out a new jersey covered in cats' assholes. They've signed 11 players this off-season. They've added some other loan signings, 2 other loan signings this year alone, 2 others at the end of last year, although renewing loans in that case. They might be about to lose their head coach to an English Championship side just before the season starts. So much to talk about, and we're going to delve into a bit of Montreal in this part. I'm wanting to kind of do a bit more coverage of some of the non-Whitecaps teams this season. I'm going to jump on a lot more conference calls and just have some parts dedicated to other teams just to kind of expand the knowledge, expand the coverage that we're doing. So we're going to talk Montreal this week. And let's start, we haven't got Jake's thoughts on this. What did you make of the whole rebrand? Gone are the Impact, it's CF Montreal, or whatever you want to call them. Do you like it? Do you feel... I guess they're going for the younger demographic, so someone like yourself. I know you're obviously not from Montreal, but does it scream like modern to you?
I was surprised when I saw that they were going the route of a full rebrand. I mean, I was never a huge fan of Impact specifically as the team name, but I do think that the rebrand is a bit of a step back just because I don't see the point of replacing something that is unique in a sense with something that's a lot more generic like this one is.
Yeah, it's been a strange one. It's still really not sitting well with the fans. There was 7 or 8 supporters groups had combined to issue a thing urging them to go back. There's no way they're going back on this now. I mean, they could maybe have some Impact retro jerseys or something down the line, but this is set now. This is not going to change.
In your first question, when you asked me, like, do you think this is more of a modern look? I don't know if that's something that like should be the most desired thing, at least here for Montreal, for Vancouver, whatever. Like, I feel like MLS specifically just has to embrace the weirdness that comes with the league in a way, with the way it's set up. We've mentioned all the convoluted roster rules, the fact that we're in North America, and there's that North American sports culture that's just naturally baked into most people here. The fact that you can never point to an MLS match, you'll never be able to point to an MLS match and say, this is the most polished, top quality soccer that you can find on TV, just because you're never going to be able to compete with other leagues in the world directly in that regard. So I feel like the teams need to embrace being MLS teams. And I think that the unique team names are part of that identity of who the league is and who the teams are.
That's actually spot on, because like when I speak to friends back in Scotland, a lot of them that have interest in MLS, and there's not many because some of them just can't be bothered with it, mainly because of times and things as well. But the games are all shown on Sky Sports, and there is good coverage over there, and with big name players coming over, English players coming over, stuff like that, it gets a lot more attention now. But they love the uniqueness, they love the weirdness. Some of the really old MLS jerseys, we've been talking about this on our WhatsApp chat that I've got with East Fife fans. They love that weirdness of it. They like the uniqueness, the different names. It feels like a foreign league, but in a nice way. And I think then people here try to cater too much to be accepted in Europe. It's like, oh, we want to be taken seriously because they still think that we're a joke and various things like that. So we're going to try and drop the names. And if you look at the teams that's come in, Atlanta United, FC Cincinnati, Austin, like things like that, they're just going for just plain names, really. And I don't. Yeah, embrace it. I think that's what they should do. Did you get a chance to look at the new kit at all? And if you did, what did you make of it?
I mean, I think it's just pretty much like a safe play, really. Not very offensive, not anything special. I'm not as much of a fan of plain solid colored jerseys in general, but you could do worse than black with blue trim. I think I would have liked it more personally if the main color was more of a blue, even if it was a darker blue as opposed to the black or gray. But really, the whole thing is just like, okay.
Yeah, I love a black kit. I've got to say that, but blue is what I associate with Montreal, and I guess they're veering a little bit away from that now, Zach, as well, with going with that black kit. I mean, what did you make of it? It's not horrible, but it doesn't. It's going to take a bit of getting used to that. This is Montreal's new identity, basically.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because the blue and black and the white and blue and the gray and stuff they've done in MLS has actually been really good, especially the blue and black stripes. I can understand why when you own a football club in Montreal and you own a football club in Bologna, you might not want one of them. You might not want the club of Montreal to look like, you know, one of the bigger clubs in Serie A where Bologna plays. So I can understand that, but they did have a really nice. I thought they had one of the nicer kits in MLS over the years. That I think we talked about that previously, Michael. But yeah, this new one, it's not horrible. It's not amazing. Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, I think you should keep calling them the Impact, Michael. I mean, you were there.
I probably will. I've been on a couple of Montreal calls the last couple of weeks, and a couple of the journalists have talked about the Impact, and then immediately corrected themselves, going, "Oh, I'm still trying to get used to this."
Yeah, but here, I mean, you guys sort of kind of touched on this. One of the things in this whole conversation is this: when you start a football league, you know, like we're seeing with CPL now, like MLS 6 years ago or whatever it is now. One of the things you don't have that you long for, and that you connect to in any way you can, any meaningful way you can, is history. And it's just so strange that they've just stripped away that history with one fell swoop, and they don't want to be attached to the name of it. And we talked about the pros and cons before, but it's so weird. It is so weird. And yeah, I've been in touch. Like the supporters in Montreal have been in touch. One of the guys who founded the Ultras has reached out and said, "Hey, will you support our thing? Can we put your guys' name on this thing?" And we were like, "Yeah, heck yeah, heck yeah. We're gonna call you the Impact. Like, you're always gonna be the Impact." So, yeah, I feel really bad for those people. Like, does this happen much? Like, I can't think of a time this happens to like other sports that are maybe more long-standing or whatever, other than the whole relocation thing.
Well, and other than like names like Redskins and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but
okay,
yeah.
Okay. So there's modern versions of why.
Yeah.
There's a couple NBA teams that have done a rebrand in terms of like the team name, the logo, whatever, but it's not super common. Really, my biggest takeaway from the whole Montreal rebrand was thinking, oh no, what are the odds that at some point in the future that the Whitecaps are going to do some sort of rebrand, drop the name Whitecaps? Like, I don't want that to happen. I love the name.
Yeah,
and
it's
going
unique.
to something like Vancouver FC or Vancouver United would be so much worse. Like when you think of the Cascadia region, you're not thinking Vancouver FC, Seattle FC, Portland FC. It's Whitecaps, Sounders, Timbers, and there's identity there. As Zach mentioned, there's history there. And Whitecaps is a great name in my opinion.
Yeah, the only other Whitecaps team I know is a minor league baseball team, the Michigan Whitecaps, and I only know that because they've been tagged a couple of times and stuff by mistake, and then tweeted stuff out about it. But yeah,
there's also like a school in Texas. I forget what Galveston, Texas has a team, and their baseball team. I don't know if it's a whole school, but their baseball team is called the Whitecaps. And I only know that because a student I worked with went and played for them for a couple of years.
Well, now they've got Whitecaps in Texas for snowy reasons, never mind anything else, of course. But the only thing I can think of is like a couple of seasons ago in England, the owner that had come in tried to change Hull City to Hull Tigers, and the fans were in outrage and stopped that. But he wanted to do it because he wanted them to have a unique name, because he said City's too generic, just like United or FC's generic. So he was coming at it like, Hull Tigers gives us an identity that no one else has. So he was going at it from the opposite of what clubs here seem to want to do.
And then Cardiff City, the owner changed it because he was...
Oh, no, he changed the colours.
The colours. He changed the colours because he's from a country
Malaysia,
in Asia,
yeah.
Malaysia, where red is the big colour, an important colour. So he changed it from blue to red.
Yeah. The Cardiff City nicknamed the Bluebirds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on from that talk. Let's talk about player stuff now. So Montreal have signed an amazing 11 players this off-season.
How can you do that during a pandemic, Michael?
And going to play in a different country. Although, to be fair, 4 of those 11 were academy players. So I guess 7 real players. I'm doing that in inverted commas. But some of them seem random. Some of them leave you wondering exactly what direction the club is kind of going. Of those 7 signed players, 3 of them are forwards. And you've got another loan guy that's a forward as well. So there's 2 loan guys. So like 4 out of the 9 are forwards, which Thierry Henry said he was targeting an out-and-out number 9. He was needing more goals this year, so that makes a lot of sense. Now, one of the guys that has come in as a forward is a guy that obviously we know very well here in Vancouver. Draft pick in 2013, spent a lot of seasons here in Vancouver. Erik Hurtado made a surprise switch really back to Canada, coming back to Montreal after looking quite happy with Kansas City. They took up his option. They'd signed him to a new deal this off-season as well. We'll talk about him going there in a sec, but before we do that, I just want to play a little bit of audio. I jumped on a call with Erik on Friday morning. Just play a little bit of that just now.
I know these things are out of your control as a pro athlete, but you had a good season in Kansas City. I'm sure you thought you were coming back. You scored a spectacular goal. It's considered the goal of the season, maybe the goal of franchise history. Can you just explain to us, please, as best as you can, just what went down? Why are you not in Kansas City anymore, do you believe?
I don't know. Only the big man up top knows why. I guess there was some miscommunication between us, but whatever it was, that's behind me, and it led me to Montreal, and I'm super excited to be a part of the club and super excited to get started.
Can you just give me a timeline of how this came together? Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like, as far as I can tell, you said goodbye to Kansas City just like relatively a few days ago on Instagram, and it seems like this came together very quickly. Can you just take us through the process of it, please?
Yeah, I had to give a shout out to KC because ever since I got to KC, they showed me love, and you know it was a good team to be a part of. So I just wanted to say my farewells. But I didn't know where I was going yet, and I didn't know if the doors were for sure shut with Kansas City. And so once I was able to sign that contract with Montreal, then the doors were shut. So I was able to bid my farewell. And so that's what that was about. It just happened. It happened over the last week and a half.
Erik, you're used to life in Canada, but obviously this season there's still a lot of unknowns as to where all the Canadian teams are going to be based and stuff like that. Is your plan to move your family to Montreal right away? Or are you just going to wait to see how it lies? And how is your French?
My French is okay. Je m'appelle Erik. That's all I really know. But my plan is to wait and see what the team comes up with. I don't know where we're going to be based yet. So right now my family's just going to be put on hold right now. They're going to be staying with our family right now. until we know what's going on. And then if we are going to be up in Montreal, then yes, they will come up to Montreal with me. We're actually in the process right now of applying for my son's passport. So once he gets that passport, then they'll be able to come up and be with me for the time being.
It's been a long time since you came to the league. It's like, I remember you being here in Vancouver 2013, you're going into your 9th season. How do you feel your game has developed in the last 9 years, and what do you think this move to Montreal is going to do to kind of help take your game then to the next level?
I feel like during the games, I'm able to control myself a little more, control my body. I feel like my first touch and my awareness has gotten better. My knowledge of the game has gotten better just because I've been around it for so long at a top level. And I'm very excited to bring that and my knowledge to Montreal and what I've learned in Kansas City, bring that to Montreal as well. And I feel like I found myself a little bit in Kansas City when I lost myself in Vancouver. So I feel like I'm in a really good place right now, mentally, physically, and I feel like it'll be a good fit for me.
First time in the Eastern Conference. As you know, Montreal has a very young team this year. First of all, did you have the chance to talk with Thierry Henry? You know, there's a lot of rumor surrounding the coach right now, and maybe what type of you know that you're going to be a veteran this year. Do you want to be like a mentor for all those youngsters? Thank you.
I have not got a chance to talk with the coach yet, with Thierry, and I don't know anything about any rumors about him. I'm really looking forward to getting up there and meeting him and working with him. You know, I grew up watching him, and I think it's going to be a really good experience and I'm going to get a lot of knowledge from him. Yeah, I mean, I'm a vet now. It's weird to think like that. You know, the time flies by, but I'd like to think of myself as an older vet, as a mentor that can, you know, guide the youngsters on how to be and where to go and how to handle situations on the field and off the field. You know, I'm still learning too. It's a process, but I'm excited to whatever role I'll have on the team. I'm excited for it, and I'm just going to try and bring positivity and creativity and hard work to the team.
This team last year was quite thin at forward, and in the offseason, we did see a few players coming in. Given that there's a lot of new faces up top, do you feel like there's an opportunity for you to make an impact and grab a good chunk of minutes for this team?
I hope so. I feel like it's always good to have players in a good amount of players in a position to make it competitive. And yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of fresh faces on the team right now. So maybe the spot is up for grabs right now. So I'm just going to come in preseason and I'm going to do what I do, work as hard as I can. And if I'm called to be that starter, then you know, I'm going to give 100%. If I'm called to be on the bench, then I'm going to work my butt off to get to that starting position.
So Erik Hurtado, new CF Montreal forward. If you look at his journey from Whitecaps rookie to now, and I asked him in the chat there, like how he feels his game's grown, and he just feels he's a more all-round player now, and his control's a lot better, which I think it is, because that was something he was criticised here for a lot. But one of the interesting things that he said there was, towards the end of his time in Vancouver, he felt a little lost here in Vancouver. He kind of had lost himself as a player. But then he went to Kansas City and he refound himself again. He refound the player that he wanted to be. Basically, he refound his love of the game. And although he's left there, he says that now, mentally and physically, he's where he wants to be, and he's ready to go. So, I mean, like, Zach, you've watched Erik for years here. How do you feel you've seen his growth he's coming up for his 9th season now in MLS, so his 8 seasons in MLS, how have you seen him grow?
Yeah, I think, well, Erik is a player who possesses speed. He's not the tallest player, but he possesses pretty good strength. But one of the things when you talk to his coaches from his time in Vancouver here that they'll talk about is how his ability to work for the team and work hard. I know Robbo really appreciated him and all the things that he contributed. I know in talking to some of his other coaches, they would say like they they feel like he should have gotten more opportunity even when he was here, but also in Kansas City. Because you saw in Kansas City and you saw here in Vancouver just glimpses of the technique and the quality that he can finish with. Now, obviously, you need to be consistent and all that kind of stuff, but even this year, he scored that wonder.
Oh, yeah. Like, he's good for a Galazzo a year, but that's then tied in with the problem, Jake. It's that the consistency, you don't see that from him week in, week out, which is why he is a bench player, basically, in MLS.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he's 30 now is crazy to me.
Yeah.
To think about. Like, and you mentioned he's good for Galazzo every once in a while. Like, the strongest Hurtado memory that I have is when he scored the goal that clinched the playoff spot back in 2017 in that crazy game in Kansas City when they had 20% possession, and then out of nowhere he scores a goal, they win 1-0. But he's just a very frustrating player from a fan perspective always in his time in Vancouver, although he did end up scoring the last goal at BC Place that was in front of fans.
Yes.
Which was funny enough. And
should have put money on that. That was almost guaranteed he was going to score in that game.
And I went back to the match preview that I wrote after that game for the second game of the season and dug up this fun fact I'd like to share with you guys. So can you guys guess how many goals Hurtado has scored in MLS play at BC Place in his career?
You're going to tell me that was his only one, aren't you?
He scored against Seattle, that wonder strike against Seattle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where are all those other ones?
Two?
Is it only 2?
No, the answer is 4.
Oh,
okay.
And one of them was against the Whitecaps.
Yeah, if we come back with Montreal and do that at some game here as well, but it makes sense. You're motivated against your former team. The interesting thing is I can't remember. I spoke to him and Johnny Russell, Kansas City training before that home opener, and I can't remember who I spoke to first and who I spoke to last, but he was one of the last players I actually physically saw, and actually spoke to, which is kind of a weird thing. But whenever you speak to him, usually he's not very forthcoming with his answers. I didn't use the interview I did with him because I asked him 5 questions and it was like just over a minute. That's how short his answers were. And then he just did a lengthy conference call where he gave really long answers and really thoughtful answers. So I think he has kind of matured and come out of his shell a bit.
It's not just that, though, Michael. Part of it is, I think, 2 things. I can't remember if it was media. Like, I think he felt burned by the media a little bit.
Yeah, he did.
By the media, and it's absolutely with the fan base, with the supporters. He felt underappreciated and like they didn't always maybe support him. Yeah, I think at BC, I don't know if he got booed or whatever it was, but I just remember there was a bit of a dark time for him. I remember talking to him at training. I remember talking to him at the stadium, and him. He is very he's a very emotive individual. You can tell the mood he's in by his body language usually, and he's not for better or for worse. From what I remember, he's not good at hiding it. Like, you can very much kind of get the sense of where he's at from just kind of looking at him or spending a little bit of time with him. You know if he's up, you know if he's down, and so I think that had a lot to do with maybe his answers for you. Not just you, but there was others. I know he chose to disengage with fans, especially in Vancouver, on in places like social media, like on Instagram and Twitter.
Oh yeah, Whitecaps social media was brutal towards him, and I think it was unfair because he worked hard at getting his control and improving his game. And the big thing that surprised me with this, though, Jake, is now obviously you want to play at the top level, which in North America is MLS. But he's gone to Montreal, where he's in a squad where, I'm just having a quick look here. You've got their other new signing who we're about to hear from in a sec, Bjorn Jonsson, 29-year-old who's joined from the K-League. He's an American Norwegian. They signed an 18-year-old Nigerian prospect, Sanusi Ibrahim. They've got Joaquin Torres, 24-year-old Argentine winger on loan from New Old Boys. And then you've got Lassi Lappalainen, whose loan's been extended for this year. Rommel Kyoto, who led the line for last year. And the American Mason Toy. So you're looking at that, and that's a lot of attackers. So Erik's going in there, and you have to think Erik's going to now be a bench player in Montreal. So why has he chosen to maybe do that as opposed to dropping down to USL, where he would probably be a starter week in, week out?
Well, as mentioned, he's 30. So I feel like if you're dropping down to the USL despite having MLS offers on the table, like he obviously did, then it would likely be for a bid to do well there and then be able to bounce back up to a bigger MLS opportunity. But if you're already at the point where he is in his career, he might not be as interested in doing that, possibly.
Well, interestingly, there was always loads of rumours, which the club denied, that he had refused to play for WFC2 because he was the guy that wasn't even featuring in the game day 18. So you're like, well, why is he not playing USL? But everyone then jumped to conclusions that he had said he didn't want to do it, and the club said that wasn't true. The other thing around that I heard was it was kind of felt that mentally he wasn't the kind of guy that could maybe drop down to USL. He'd see it as being a demotion, and it would maybe affect how he just approached the game mentally. So yeah, maybe he's a guy that needs to be at the top level to bring the best out of him. I don't know. I mean,
he'll be in training with Montreal all the time, and it might be a sort of thing where he's betting on himself that he can outperform all these other forwards that Montreal has got and get some sort of featured role in the team.
I think it's up for grabs there as well. And I'm going to play a little bit of audio now from one of the other news signings. Now, this is the guy that I feel is going to be leading the line, or at least beside Kyoto if they're going for two up front, or battling with Kyoto as the main starter. They've brought him in from the K-League, was playing in Korea. Bjorn Jonsson. He had a spell at Hearts in Scotland. I don't really remember him there, but I mean, he's been at some top clubs, Rosenlund, AZ in Holland. And before we talk about him, let's just play a little bit of audio. One of the things that struck me about him is Montreal have got a great guy, by the looks of it, on the pitch, but also a great guy off the pitch, because he's very charismatic. So let's hear a little bit now from Montreal's other new signing, more of an out-and-out forward this time, Bjorn Jonsson.
Can you just talk about how often you've moved around? I think you've played for 8 teams in 8 countries, and you know, so just your reaction now about coming to yet one more country and one more team, please.
Obviously, my career has been moving around a lot. I've changed different sceneries, different teams, different cultures. Asia now. For me, it's just been an amazing experience. Obviously, I was born in New York. I was raised in North Carolina to my dad. And, when I got the opportunity to go to Norway to play in Europe, I had the passport, so it was really easy for me to do it. I just really wanted to try to, I could have gone to university and played at UNC or Syracuse or something like that, and maybe try to get into the MLS by that way. But, I just felt that after watching so much football on TV as a kid, I don't see those guys going to university and becoming professionals so early in their career. So I thought it was probably the best idea was to, my father also gave me the idea, just go and try. And if you doesn't work out, then you can always go home and study and get your diploma afterwards. So for me now, everything went well, obviously. Changing so many teams concerning that, I think, every year I played well. I was a striker. So as a striker, as you may know, when you play good, you score goals, you get bought by another team or another team wants you. And maybe your team can't pay the salary that you want. Or, there's so many different factors to me moving each team. For example, I'll give you just a couple examples. In Portugal, I was making crap money and, I was playing fantastic. And, Benfica wanted me at that moment. Sporting gave me a trial. And, I was just really feeling good about my soccer. I thought, I was getting better than what my team was. So I had to move. And, yeah, obviously the Bulgarians gave me a huge contract that I couldn't say no to. And at that moment, at your young age, maybe it wasn't the best decision, or maybe it was. I don't know. Obviously, my career went well afterwards. So I think that thanks to them, I got the opportunity to play in the first division in Litex, and there I just kept flying forward. Yeah, from Montreal, I really think that after so many places that me and my wife have talked about it a lot lately in the last couple of years, we decided to go to Asia, and couldn't say no to that opportunity and the contract they offered me. A team that was going to be in contention for the league and for the cup and for the Champions League. I mean, we were basically 2 or 3 kicks away from having a treble. So I mean, I got a red card at the second to last game. I mean, that was bad luck, and the small stuff like that. I mean, we could have had a trouble in the last year. So, winning the Champions League, that's a dream come true, whether it's in Asia or any place in Europe. So, for me, I'm just very proud to have played at so many clubs and so many fantastic clubs like Rosenborg, Hearts, AZ, ADO. These are big clubs in Europe. So now we felt that it was the best for now. We're having a baby soon. So, the best for us was to maybe settle down and try to focus on a 3-year contract, trying to be at a place for 3 years. Or even more, I can play well and decide to stay for 5-6 years, like Piatti. I mean, that's the idea. The idea for me is to come to Montreal and push myself into the team and make sure that I'm indispensable and that I'm a player that the club needs and the club wants me to stay. So that's the motive right now, and that's what I'm pushing for, and that's what we're striving for, me and my wife. And I mean, let's hope that it goes that way.
I was wondering, what's your situation right now with the Norwegian national team? Obviously, the pandemic threw a wrench into any plans that anybody had, but do you feel that a move to MLS can maybe help you in that sense to stay on the radar for the national team? And I was wondering as well, has anyone given you any privileged insight into how MLS has evolved since you left the US? I mean, Kim Ki-hee jumps to mind because I think you played with him in South Korea.
Yeah.
Or anyone else do that for you?
Obviously, I just talked to Ki-hee about this, like not even 2 months ago, before the Champions League, or 3 months ago before the Champions League. I told him, look, he had an offer actually from an MLS team. I don't know what it was, so I can't really tell you that. But he told me, yeah, the MLS is calling again. It's really important for him. He had a fantastic year, obviously, winning the MLS Cup. So he obviously has great memories. Not a player who lost every game. So yeah, he just told me that right now the continuity of all the teams playing well and doing better every year and getting better players every year. And, I obviously follow as well. So, small things like MLS is back and extra time. I watch those podcasts. I follow the MLS. So yeah, many people might not remember me because I've played so long, but the people from North Carolina, they know who I am. So they know that I've always thought about maybe coming back to MLS. I didn't know if it was going to be now or at the last year of my career. I didn't know. So obviously right now I just got the opportunity. Thank you to Olivier and thank you to Montreal as well. Right now, for me, the national team is second fiddle for me right now. Right now I'm really focused on my club football. I had that opportunity to play for the national team. I was really excited to represent my country. Obviously, I went to Asia right in the moment that Haaland got the big explosion of scoring goals for Dortmund and Salzburg. So yeah, I mean, at the moment, I know that coming out of Asia, finally coming to a place that's renowned for its football again in MLS, being a good league now. There's obviously Norwegians who have played there, Diamande, Adama, and obviously Jürgen, who plays in Philadelphia. It's players are playing there, so I know that people are watching us, and while playing in the MLS, that will be as well. But that's not my main focus. My main focus is to be focused on the club football because I already have my credentials in the national team, and if they call me, they call me. If they don't, I'm not going to be crying at home. I know that the most important right now is the club, and the club right now is also the most important for me and my wife. So that's how it is, and that's how I am in my career right now. If I get called, I get called. That's how it is.
You're coming in, striker. This team didn't have a target man for a while. I'm not going to say who was the last target man. I don't want to put that pressure on you, but it's coming in and making an impact right away as a target man this team didn't have for a while. On your mind coming into training camp?
And obviously, I know who it is. It's Drogba, one of my favorite strikers of all time. So obviously, that was also helpful knowing that Piatti and Drogba are players that I'm coming after. So I know the pressure of playing in a team, and that's what you live for. That's what you play football for. Is is to have pressure, to be able to look at some statistics and say, look, hey, I can maybe catch Drogba, I can maybe catch Piatti, I can maybe do this kind of things. But my first really reaction is I want to learn from Henry. One of also my idols as well. One of my idols as well is Ibrahimovic, who played in MLS a couple of years ago. And these kind of players, you watch their videos and you watch what they've done, and you try to emulate that or learn from those kind of people. And now I have the opportunity to learn from one of the three. Well, I can't say no to those kind of opportunities. So for me right now, the most important is getting to pre-camp, winning my place, because I know that Olivia bring me to the club and that Henry wants a certain kind of players. And if I'm not in that kind of idea or conversation, then I need to win my place. So in that perspective, I know that I'm coming to win my place. I'm from ground zero all over again, like every year I have in my career. And I'm excited. I mean, I'm really excited. I am 29. I'm not old, but I'm not young. So I know that I have the experience of what I've learned before. Obviously, I need to learn some French and go from there. I think that, my opportunity to play is very high. And I want to make sure that I win my place and show that I'm one of the better strikers in the club.
You touched on it there. You're coming to a club as a striker where you've got a legendary striker in charge in Thierry Henry. What are you hoping that he can help bring out of your game? You're 29, you're obviously a seasoned player. What do you feel he can bring your game to the next level? What do you still feel you need to work on?
I have pretty much perfected the aerial part of football, basically. Winning the ball with the head, holding it up, because that's what I was accustomed to doing in the national team in Norway, to doing in Scotland, to doing in out of Den Haag. That's what I was asked to do. Now I might be asked to do something else. So to have an all-around game, the best person to learn from is someone who was absolutely amazing with his feet. So having Henry as a coach or a trainer is probably the best thing that could help take that next step, because as a top player, most of our primes are later in our career. So if I'm learning now in my 29th year, maybe in my 30th year, next year, I'm a totally new player that has the whole package. So I want to be able to make sure that I know I need to learn. I'm coming knowing that I need to learn. I'm not coming knowing that I know everything. I don't know everything. Henry knows much more than I do. So I know that learning from him can help my game and help the team. So the most that I can do is ask him for help and ask him what I can do to win my place in the team and what he needs me to do. And from there, I can be very straightforward and say, look, yes, I can do that. Or those are limitations that I can't do. And that's it. It's a conversation, really. It's more knowing your place. As a young player, you can learn so many different things over a course of 5 to 6 years. Montreal bring me in because they know that I'm a seasoned player and that they can count on me right now. So I hope that I can learn in this preseason some small little tricks that I can use in the games that will help me get my statistics and my assists and goals ratios higher for when the season comes.
So new Montreal signing Bjorn Jonsson there. An American Norwegian. Don't get many of those combinations, but he's played basically his whole career overseas, mostly in Europe. Yeah, he's had 11 clubs in 10 years. Montreal will be his 12th club in his 11th year. Canada's going to be the 8th country that he's played his trade in as well. He's played Bulgaria, Spain, Portugal, Scotland, Norway, Sweden. So he's been all over the place. He's averaging a goal every 3 games, and in recent years a little bit better than that. He's played with some big clubs, as I said. So he looks like a guy. I'm really interested to see how he does in MLS, because he is American, but he decided, as he said there, he didn't want to go down the college route, because he said he watches football on TV, he watches these professionals, and he's like, they didn't go to college and then become a professional. They went and became professionals right away. So that's the route that he's chosen to do. I know nothing about him, despite the fact that he played in Scotland, because I don't remember him, as I mentioned. But, I mean, from what you've seen or read about him, I don't know if you've read much about him, I think he could be a good pickup for Montreal. I'm excited to see what he does beside Kyoto.
Yeah, I know very little of them other than the things you've mentioned, Michael. It is it is going to be interesting to see. I think more so for me what is done with Kyoto, because a lot of the time last year he was played up top more as opposed to out wide, which is where we first got to know him as a more of a wide player when he was at Olympia.
Well, Jonsson seems more your number 9, so that
Yeah.
could probably allow them then to move Kyoto out to the wing again.
But Kyoto, I think, also played in a 2 last year a number of times, if my memory serves me correctly. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do there, because Kyoto was like key for them in terms of goal scoring, and so yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, Erik, I think, like in Vancouver, like in Kansas City, is going to have to just fight for his place in there, and hopefully his work rate and some consistency and those flashes of brilliance get him some time, or maybe he's a part of a 3 with those players, or they do, or some combination of the other attacking options they have. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Jake, do you know much about this guy?
No, I don't. Definitely an interesting CV, though, getting to bounce around the world while playing soccer.
Yeah, and some of the stuff I didn't include in the interview there, because it was a 29-minute chat he had, and he was happy, he said, to answer questions all day. So I've only included 10 minutes of it. But he has a house in Spain, and that's where he was doing the interview from. And he said they bought that right away, and that's where they always come back to in their off seasons. They live in Spain because his wife's Spanish. And he said most Norwegian players retire in Spain after they've finished playing. But he was very open. He bounced around because he wanted to be paid for what he did. So anyone that offered him a decent deal, he went to play there. He said he was playing in Portugal, and his exact words, the pay was crap. So Bulgarian club comes in with big money, off he goes to Bulgaria. Now, he's got a 3-year deal in Montreal, but one of the interesting things for him and Erik is they both talked about, as strikers, how excited they were to come and work under the legend, world-class striker, Thierry Henry. So that was a big selling point for Jonsson coming to Montreal. He said Henry is one of the players that he looked up to and is one of his idols, so he wanted to go and work with him. Erik as well talked about what he can learn from Henry and to bring his game on, and is Henry even going to be there? Because there's all the rumours at the moment. I'm hoping to get this out before anything happens. That's why we're Montreal heavy this episode. It looks like he's going over to England with Bournemouth in the Championship, which in itself, it strikes me as a weird move. Bournemouth just now, they're 6th in the Championship. They look a long way off automatic promotion, so they're fighting for the playoff spot. They're in the last playoff spot just now, and they've got 3 points to play with. Now, for me, a club like that, bringing in Thierry Henry, who hasn't done great at Monaco, he hasn't done great at Montreal, it strikes me as that would be an appointment that would be just for name factor alone, to try and sell tickets, to try and get publicity for your team, as opposed to a guy that might get them in the playoffs and take them up. And I'm maybe doing a disservice to Thierry Henry there. But I mean, Jake, it strikes me as a bizarre one.
I guess it's a pretty funny coincidence. I ended up coming on this episode specifically because I became a fan of Bournemouth after they got promoted to the Premier League a few years ago. And I've stayed a fan of them since then. I've been watching their games when I can in the Championship this season.
Okay, well, we got to stop. We got to pause here for a minute. How does one become a fan of Bournemouth?
Well, at the time when they got promoted to the Premier League, I'd been watching the Premier League for a while, but never had a team that I was really cheering for. So when I was reading up on the teams that had been promoted that season and their story was super cool, going from League 2 up to the Premier League in like 5 years or whatever they did, and started watching more of their games because of that. And I enjoyed watching them and I've just stuck with it since then.
Yeah, I've got to admit, when they got promoted, they were the team I was rooting for as well, outside of West Ham, because it's like a small provincial team doing this. They nearly went bust seasons before. I've got a documentary. Actually, I don't know if you've seen this, Jake. There's a documentary about Bournemouth from bust to to think it's like fascinating. And like Brighton's the same. They're another club that nearly dropped out the Football League and now punching above their weight. But I've got an article up here from Saturday from Sky Sports. So that there's 4 people in the frame for this Bournemouth job. So there's Henry. This is ex-Arsenal teammate Patrick Vieira. There's former Schalke and Huddersfield manager David Wagner, who's got experience in the Premier, and the current caretaker boss Jonathan Woodgate. Now, out of those 4, Henry would be the last guy I would want as my manager in terms of what he's actually done.
It's funny that you mentioned the name thing, because that was what stuck out to me after they fired their former manager and have been on the search for the last couple of weeks, because the first early front runner was Frank Lampard. And I was again thinking, well, that's kind of weird. Is that just a name thing? And then John Terry came up. It's like, what are they? Are they just looking for former players? And then so when Thierry Henry popped up, that was even the furthest one out of left field, because I didn't think he would be thinking of leaving Montreal right now, given that he's only been there for a year. So I'm not really sure what they're looking for at the moment as a club in terms of the manager.
I don't know what they're looking for players, for management, whatever. I mean, the thing is, Zach, when Henry got that job, and I'm sure many others thought he's using it as a stepping stone. He's going to end up back in Europe. Fair enough. If he'd done it at the end of the season, fair enough. But to suddenly leave the club potentially in the lurch a couple of weeks before the season starts, I don't know. I mean, Henry seems to be the favourite to get it according to the media. I don't know that he is.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't. Vieira would seem more like a not a bigger name, but like more of a better, like you said, better experience.
Yeah, I like David Wagner. I like what he did with Huddersfield.
Yeah,
he took them up.
David Wagner is a part of this horrible season that Schalke's having. So I feel really bad for him, and I would be happy for him to go there and do well. You said Jonathan Woodgate, right?
Yeah, he's the caretaker boss there just now. But yeah, I'd rule him out probably. Maybe have Henry before it.
I don't know.
Henry's got contacts, is what they're thinking.
Oh yeah,
but
that hasn't really paid off in Montreal.
No, but the publicity that Bournemouth would get by hiring Henry, because he'd be doing all his Sky stuff as well, again, that he used to do. So, I mean, there's that aspect of it. I just don't know that he's got what they need right now if they're trying to get back to the Premier right away.
Yeah, but like, how much publicity are you going to get if you're hiring Henry, but then just end up staying like mid-table in the championship, or potentially even going a little bit lower than that? You're going to get bad publicity then, because it's like he'll be scrutinised for everything he does. Mm-hmm.
And the English media take no prisoners.
Like you mentioned with the Montreal being a stepping stone thing, I can't imagine he's thinking, I want to be a manager in the championship for any longer than I might have to be.
Yeah.
Because if he's looking to go at Bournemouth, he might be thinking, betting on himself to get back up to the Premier League, and then all of a sudden he's a Premier League manager.
Yeah, that's probably a good shout. I mean, the Championship, it's my favourite league in the English league system, just because it's always so competitive. And those playoffs are an absolute lottery. Once you get into the playoffs, it doesn't matter if you're 3rd, 4th, 5th or 6th. Anyone's got a chance. So he has to get them there first of all. And then it's whether he can get them motivated the way that he needs to get them motivated for it. From a Montreal perspective, an interesting aspect is Johnson mentioned that it was the Montreal sporting director, Olivier Renard, that is the reason that he has come to Montreal. He did all the negotiations. He spoke to him. He'd followed his career for a while. So Renard did that signing. Erik revealed that he hasn't spoken to Thierry Henry. So again, it's Renard that's doing all this. So it kind of makes you wonder, how much actual say has Henry had in these transfers in Montreal? Or is it Olivier Renard that's doing all this? I don't know if that's a good strategy to have, because you've still got a bit of continuity. But then if Henry moves on, you've got a new manager coming in, and none of these are his players, but he might not be able to get rid of anyone he doesn't want because the sporting director is the guy that's brought them in.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario. And when players talk like that, it's usually not like if they don't mention the coach, especially one who's so high profile, that's awkward. And then to say, like you said, Erik said, to say I haven't spoken with the coach yet, that's really weird. So again, it might not be anything, but it feels a little bit where, there's some smoke, there's some fire kind of thing, which I think would not be good for Montreal. Like I think in terms of this, what they're trying to do, bigger picture, and even this whole changing the name and stuff, I think you're helped when you have someone like Thierry Henry. It helps you ride out, the difficulties that you are going to face with your loyal, your loyal supporters. And so if he leaves, this is like I think it's a real gut punch for them, and it'll be interesting to see how they recover for it, or behind the scenes how they've been planning for it.
And maybe he's just not a fan of the rebrand. Maybe he's a big Impact fan.
Yeah,
that would be amazing if he came out of this and said, "Yeah, I'm not so disappointed that I left. They made this really awful change."
Yeah, I've always been an Impact fan. I just could not support that.
He grew up a fan of the Impact.
Yeah, if he says something like, "Yeah, I'm no snowflake. I don't want to be a part of this."
It leaves him in a mess.
I mean, I can't imagine any scenario where your manager maybe jumping ship a month or two before the season starts after you've signed 11 players is an ideal scenario from a leadership perspective.
Like, the only experience I've had of that actually worked out positive. Like, there was the 96-97 season, East 5 had a high profile manager, and we always knew he was going to move back to a bigger team, and he moved up 2 divisions back to the Premiership, but he left us right towards the end of pre-season, just a week before the season was going to start. And we're like, oh, we're in a mess now. But then we appointed Steve Archibald, former Scotland international, played with Spurs and Barcelona. He got his promotion. So that worked out good. So this could work out good for Montreal. But that's a very different situation because it's lower league football and you can just go and sign whoever or whatever. Now, you've got a coach that's going to be coming in. I mean, I don't even know where they would start to look, but you have to feel it's going to be another European coach with Renard being there. And, like, if Zinedine Zidane got sacked by Real Madrid, he strikes you as the kind of player that would just walk into a job in Montreal, another high-profile guy. Patrick Vieira, maybe he doesn't get the Bournemouth job and walks into Montreal.
Well, there another interesting thing that could happen there if it was Vieira is he has already turned down Toronto in this offseason.
Yeah, well, allegedly, but yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's a mess. But anyway, that is it for this part. That's it for Jake's involvement in this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. I said it'd be about 50 minutes. We've gone an hour and a half. That's my usual. You'll get used to this. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I've had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on.
Well, we'll get you on again soon. And yeah, we'll be back in the next part. Taking a break from MLS. We're going to actually hop in the TARDIS and do some time travelling. And we're going to be back with that after this.
Hi, I'm Erik Hurtado, and you're listening to the AFTN Soccer Show.
I know
Welcome back to the AFTN Soccer Show on CITR Radio 101.9 FM. And kicking off this part is this month's Artist of the Month, Scottish band Idlewild, with a song taken from their second album. You could argue it's their first. It was their first full-length album. I think of it as their second album because they did have a mini album out. That's from 1988. The album is called Hope is Important, and the song was A Film for the Future. Let's move away from the future. Let's get into the past. And I'm going to introduce you to a new feature on the show. I've been recording these for a couple of weeks, and I actually launched it on the East Fife podcast that I do, Glory Days of Gold, before we did it on this one. I want to have a couple of ones under our belt here before we launched it here. And yeah, we're going back in time. I'm trying to think of what I want to call this section. Right now, I'm thinking football time travels, or time travelling football. I'll work on the name anyway. But basically what this feature is going to be about is, and I tweeted this out tonight as well, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, particularly the original Doctor Who. I've got every single thing you could imagine for the original Doctor Who series. I'd love to travel in the TARDIS one day. If you could get the TARDIS, but there was some criteria that you had to use the TARDIS to go back in time to 3 football matches from any time in football's history, what 3 games would you use the TARDIS to go back and see? Now, the criteria I've set is that it could be a game that you've actually been to and you just want to relive the experience. It could be a game that you've been to and you didn't really get to enjoy it at the time and you want to relive it in its full glory, knowing what the outcome is. Or it could be a game in history that you would just love to have attended. And I'll give you my 3 just to kick this off. So 2 of them are East Fife related. One of them is I'd like to go back to 1938, Scottish Cup final replay, where East Fife beat Kilmarnock as a second-tier team. First team to do it. The lowest team ever to win the Scottish Cup in the whole history of the Scottish Cup. We beat Kilmarnock in the final. I'd just love to be at that momentous occasion. That game is the pinnacle of East Fife's history. The other game I've picked is from 1947, which was East Fife's first of their 3 League Cup wins. And that was the team, spoke about it on last week's show, that was the best East Fife team ever. 1947-48 team. They won 3 trophies. Again, they were a second-tier team. They won the League Cup. They won the league that season. And there's so many players from East Fife folklore that were in that team that I would just love the chance to go and see them play a game. So why not see them win a trophy at the same time? And my third game is a non-East Fife game. I would love to go back to the 1930 World Cup final. Uruguay-Argentina in Montevideo. I've got a book. It was a self-published book just about that World Cup in Montevideo. It's a guy whose, I think, grandfather or great-grandfather had been part of that World Cup. He's Uruguayan, and he went back and he traced his history and found all this old material in antique shops and stuff. I'd love to go to that. Such a momentous occasion. You know what the World Cup is now. Back then, did people really think it was going to be what it is today? And just to be at that special occasion, I just think would be absolutely wonderful. So what would your 3 games be in your TARDIS football time travel, Zach?
Okay, the one I obviously wasn't at, but from history would have loved to have been at. I think 1930 is a great shout. I'm going to go with 1954. 1954 is what's referred to in Germany as the Miracle of Bern, where you had Germany playing Hungary West Germany playing Hungary in the final. They played together in an opening group match, and Germany rested players and lost. I believe the score was 8-3. And then they met in the final. And I think this might have been before substitutions were allowed. And there's a couple of things that happened in this game. One, I think Hungary was up to a 2-0 lead at halftime, if memory serves me correctly. But at some point, I think in the first half, one of the German defenders decided, like, let's not let this Puskas guy just run rings around us and run the show. So I think one or two of them really gave him the boots, Michael, and really, I think he was limping the rest of the game. But
that's how to do it.
But one of my favorite parts of the story, as I understand it, is what happened at halftime. This is one of the reasons why I have such a strong appreciation for Adidas, the company. It was, of course, founded by a guy named Adi Dassler. He was the equipment manager for the German national team. Not only was he the one who, started the company from this famous shoemaking city in Bavaria, near Nuremberg, called Herzogenaurach. Anyways, he made Adidas. He became the equipment manager. He outfitted the team with all their boots, and it was a bit of, I think, a rainy day in Bern in Switzerland. And at halftime, this was the first time I think he developed this technology or made it or was new or whatever. But anyways, at halftime, he replaced all the players' studs with longer studs. And so they went out and won the game 3-2. And for me, Adidas and Adolf Dassler is someone who made an impact on world football in a major way. Like a supporter and supporters gathering together and lifting their team to victory. Adi Dassler helped lift the German national team to victory in 1954 and saw Fritz Walter lift the World Cup trophy. So I'd like to be at that game. I think that's a pretty awesome one.
Good to know you're such a big fan of Adolf.
I should have just called him Addy.
Yeah.
I knew I was opening the door to you there.
Interesting as well, he's from Nuremberg.
No, Herzogenaurach. It's outside Nuremberg.
Okay, because that's such a footballing city.
I think we've talked
about
this.
Trials there.
I think we've talked about this on the show before. But he's from this famous shoemaking town. Him and his brother originally started having a company together. They had a fight, irreconcilable differences. Can you name his brother's famous footballing company?
Puma?
You are correct, Michael. You should remember that for maybe one of our quiz nights.
Yeah.
And his brother.
It's interesting because it's either Aldi or Lidl, the German supermarket chain. They're founded by brothers as well that had a split, and then they went their own different ways. Seems to be a thing in German business.
Yeah, his name was Rudolph. So that's the first game.
The guy with the red nose. I remember seeing pictures of him. Yeah.
Oh my. Anyways, that's the story of the Dassler brothers.
That's a great. Overall, I know I'm being ridiculous and trying to be funny, but that's a wonderful story. We're actually going to come to someone else's picks later on, and that's one of the picks that they had that game.
I'm not surprised. There's a movie in German about it called The Miracle of Bern. I've never seen it, but I don't know if there's an English translation or English subtitles. But I should hunt that down, or at least that's my understanding. The other games, I know we were talking about this before. That's a game I could never have been at. I guess the next one I'm going to switch. I'll leave out my story of the Champions League final for another time, and I've told it before, so it's not that exciting maybe for you. But I guess if another game I could have gone to in history would have been, I think, in January 2000. I believe it was in California, and it was when Canada won the Gold Cup. I think that would have been pretty awesome to be at. I mean, I didn't know them at the time. I only knew them years later, but we know people from that team, like Martin Nash and Carla Corazine and Jason DeVos and others, Craig Forrest, so that would have been exciting to be a part of or to be at. And then the last one is I might be getting this wrong, but I believe it was October 12th, a Saturday or Sunday, 2008 at Swangard Stadium, which was the day of the USL final against the Puerto Rico Islanders. And it's not the greatest football match I've ever been to. It's not the biggest cup game I've ever been to, but just a lot of good memories, right? Hanging out and with people we've been hanging out with. Right? You had just been here for you came 2007, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you'd only been around a year, but there have been people I've been hanging around with for 4 or 5 years. Yeah, it was just really awesome. One of the stories, and I don't know if I've ever told you the story or the details of the story, but there was a celebration after the game. There was a couple celebrations after the game. One was, maybe you remember this, but one was the players only, but they could bring their spouses or girlfriends or whatever, family or whatever. I'll leave some of the names out of the story, but you can probably guess. One of the players gave us tickets to get in. There was, I don't know, 3 or 4 of us. Like I think Brett Graham, myself, Naz Catania. I can't remember if Mass was at this. There was I think there was more than just Brett, Naz, and I. I think there was 1 or 2 or 3 other people. And someone gave us a ticket to get into the gathering, a player. And so we're like, sweet, let's just go and like, this is great, and party and celebrate, whatever. Someone from the Whitecaps wouldn't let us in. Like they wouldn't let us in the establishment that was hosting the party, which was par for the course for the individual. But so that was a little bit disappointing. But instead, we went downtown and met the players after at the Roxy. And did we go anywhere else? Anyways, that was my first and only ever time going to the Roxy and just hang out. And I think you've seen the pictures that people like Devin took and other people took. And it was just a special night. Like it was a magical night. Did you make it to the Roxy?
No. I felt bad for leaving Caitlin, so I went home. That set me up for what I was expecting football in Vancouver to be like, winning championships.
Yeah.
And it's been disappointing since then, let's be honest. That was a special year, though, because East Fife won their first championship in 60 years, and then the Whitecaps won that as well, and I was at both. And that's one of the best footballing years of my life, 2008.
Oh, I totally believe it. And that was, we did the double that year. We won the Cascadia Cup. I always get confused between 2006 and 2008. So it was a year where we did a double. It was amazing. We won the Cascadia Cup and won the USL Cup. And that was your first year. And so you were treated well.
I was. I still love those days. I know it's easy to look back and reminisce. I'm really bad for just doing that in general, but those were great times. And that was 3 really good games that you selected there. I could have picked way more than 3. I'm sure you could have picked way more than 3, but we've set it at 3. So what I'm going to do this year is I'm going to ask a number of players, Whitecaps personnel, non-Whitecaps folk, basically most people that we chat to. This is a question I'm going to put to them this year. And we're going to bring you the first of those tonight. When I spoke to Axel Schuster last week, at the end of our chat, we had a little bit of fun with this one as well. So let's see what 3 games Whitecaps sporting director and CEO Axel Schuster would jump in the TARDIS and go back and see. If you were to jump in the Doctor's TARDIS and go back in time to anywhere in the footballing landscape, to go and see 3 matches that you've maybe seen some of them before, or games that you would just love to attend, what would be the games that you would want to go back in time and take in?
The first one would be the first game of Jürgen Klopp as a coach in Mainz. It was against Duisburg. We won the game 1-0. It was so much pressure at the day. We changed the coach, and Klopp, who was a player a week before, became coach because we fired the coach and we were in a way bad spot, and everything looked everybody, I think nobody believed that we would stay in the league. So there was so much pressure around that game. Everybody called us crazy. Now the player is the coach. So I had no time to enjoy that game, to see how a team winning after having a long period of not 0 wins. So I would love to sit again in the stadium and to feel that game and to see that game. Another game that's, by the way, is more or less the first game that still is in my remembrance. I think this is the game. If you ask me, what is the first game you remember that you have really focused and seen? It's the semi-final of the World Cup 1982, Germany against France. We were 3-1 down. It was 1-1 after 90 minutes. Germany was 3-1 down in the overtime, in the extra time, or whatever the English exact word is. And we came back in this 15 minutes and won it in penalty shootout. We lost the final, but anyway.
But you did do it in controversial circumstances.
Yeah, of course. And there's so many stories around that game, and so many things happened in that game. And France was this world-class team, and Germany won it. And obviously, Germany was not that skilled team than France, and it was a hard-working and fighting game. There were also some bad moments in that game. I know that everything is solved today, and Harald Schumacher apologized, and they got friends again. But this game is one of the very crazy games in Germany history, and it was, by the way. So I was 10 years old, so it was the first game where I would say I was fascinated. I were in front of the screen, and I followed this game. And then I think I would really go back and in time and to see, also to have a comparison, to see one of the classical World Cup games in the past with Pelé, to see this team, to get an impression, how was he at his best time. It is so hard to transfer it to today, and people try to look at stats and data. That's not fair. The games were totally different, but to feel his impact to a game, his extravagance and his perfect to his unique style of playing and being that guy. Everybody, since I'm playing soccer, since I'm following soccer, it's always Pelé. Pelé is the biggest one, and Pelé, I have never seen him live. I would love to see him once live. I had the chance to see Diego live. Of course, we had some nice games. We had several finals against the Argentines anyway. But I saw him also live in a Europa Pokal game in Stuttgart. So I was able to see him. Of course, I was able to see all the German superstars live. But I never saw him, and that's would be a dream.
That's 3 fantastic games, and the first one you picked there. Like, we've done this on our podcast that I do back in Scotland for my team East Fife, and a lot of the supporters have picked for one of their games. It's a game from 2003 where we scored an 89th minute winner to win promotion, and none of us could enjoy the game because there was so much on the line. So the whole, just to be able to sit and watch that and take it in, knowing what the end result was, would be so good. So thank you so much. I enjoyed listening to that. I'd love to have seen Pelé played as well, but unfortunately never made that. Axel Schuster there, travelling in the TARDIS, going back in time to see good selection of games there. And this, when we started doing these a couple of weeks ago on the East Fife podcast, has proved to be one of the most popular sections that we've ever done. So hopefully it's also going to get a good response from people out there. So get in touch with us on Twitter at AFTN Canada, or send us an email, aftncanada@hotmail.com. You can type it up in a lot more detail there. What 3 games would you use the TARDIS to go back and see? And remember, it could be games that you've seen and you want to relive, or games that you've never seen and would just love to have the chance to go and see. I put that question out just a couple of hours before we did the podcast tonight, so only had a couple of responses so far, but I'm sure we'll have a lot more of those. I'll read a couple that I have had just now. Oz Sweeney said he would go back and watch his uncle Mike Sweeney, at the World Cup in 1986. He'd also go to the 1999 Champions League final. That was the one where Man United came back and shocked Bayern Munich with 2 goals in the last couple of minutes. That has proved a very popular game for people, Zach.
Yeah, that's one I still have nightmares about.
And his third game would be Man United 8, Arsenal 2, one of the best matches in the Fergie era. Fully Aroused, he just says August 26th, 2015. Zach's looking puzzled.
August 26th, 2015. Was that on a Cascadia away game?
Voyageurs Cup, the only Voyageurs Cup the Whitecaps have lifted. Fully Aroused says, I was stuck in camp with my mate Joe, and the two of us had season tickets together. We even missed the first half due to work. So he'd love to just basically go back and relive that. And that's one of those games that, like I spoke at the end with Axel there about the East Fife game where we won promotion. If you could go back to a game that you haven't really been able to enjoy because you were so tense during it, but you know what the outcome is and you can go back and relive it and enjoy that a lot more. Gary Nolan, he just went for one game. He went another Champions League final, Istanbul, 2005. Now, I don't like Liverpool, but even I would love to be in the stadium amongst the Liverpool fans for that one. Just coming back in that game, just the emotions that they must have had, absolutely phenomenal. I just think it's a tremendous game to be at. So yeah, let us know what ones you would go back in time to see. I'm just going to round this section off tonight with an email that we got from Raymond Weir. Now, a couple of weeks ago, you might remember we had Raymond Weir on the show, lead singer of the Eisenhowers, penned the wonderful football song, 3 o'clock on a Saturday. And we had a chat with Raymond about lots of things to do with football. He mentioned there's no specific team he supports. He's just a football fan first and foremost. So he sent us an email with the 3 games that he would love. He said this section is right up his street and he could think of dozens of games he'd love to nip back in the terrace and attend. And if you asked him tomorrow, he might even pick 3 different ones. So the 3 that he's come up with. The first one, he discovered this game on YouTube. It's from December 1962. And it's a Scottish team, Dunfermline Athletic, Fife rivals to East Fife. They played a Fairs Cup tie, that was the precursor to the UEFA Cup, against Valencia. They'd lost the first leg 4-0 in Spain. And the return was played at a frosty East End park the week before Christmas. The Spaniards, he imagined, must have been somewhat bemused by the referee's insistence that the frozen pitch was actually playable. 20 minutes into the game, and Dunfermline had scored 3 goals to make it 4-3 in aggregate. And he feels that the Spaniards most certainly would have been bewildered by the scale of the thrashing being administered by the eager and skillful young Scottish forwards. He says you can watch the clip on YouTube, and I've actually bookmarked it. I'm going to watch it this weekend. It's an 8-minute video. And you can see the body language that Valencia players didn't really want to be there. By half-time, they were 5-1 down, and the tie was square on aggregate. He says, I don't know what the Spanish is for what the actual fuck, but I'm guessing that is what someone might have used words to that effect in the dressing room at half-time. TV commentator Bob Crampsey, who's a Scottish icon commentator, later said that during the last 10 minutes of the first half, he couldn't hear himself speak. Such was the noise from the crowd. Dunfermline eventually won the match 6-2, but these were the days before the away goals rule and penalty shootouts, so they had to have a play-off, and Dunfermline eventually lost. But that would have been an amazing comeback to see. His second one is the one that you picked there. He said, a couple of years ago I watched the official film of the 1954 World Cup, which I did as well a couple of years ago. He says it was quite charming and painted a lovely picture of an international, although not yet global, tournament before it turned into the rather bloated commercial monster that we have now. 48 teams, he says, give me a break. I am still seriously concerned about having to mortgage my house for my Panini album for 2026. Mainly concerned because I don't own my house, but I'll do whatever it takes to get that album completed. I'll tell you that now. So Ray says, judging by the highlights, the final was a remarkable game. The stadium in Bern was absolutely rammed, the pitch was soggy, and there must have been a sense amongst the crowd that they were witnessing something really special. Hungary were arguably the team that invented the modern game, and they took on a workmanlike West Germany, a side that had already thrashed 8-3 in the group stages, as you mentioned. Germans were 2-0 down inside 8 minutes, but somehow they clawed their way back into the contest. It was played like an old-fashioned cup tie from end to end. In their passing, movement and technical ability, the Hungarians looked like a top-division team, while the West Germans looked like plucky part-timers from the 3rd or 4th tier. But strange things started to happen. The German goalie was inspired, and many Hungarian attempts on goal failed for reasons which appear to defy logic. Instead of winning 9-3 or something, the Hungarians conceded a late goal to lose 3-2 in one of the greatest upsets of all time. They also had a goal disallowed in the last minute. He says that really would have been something to see. And you certainly agree with that one, Zach.
For real. I'm glad my memory's somewhat all right on that one.
And the last game Raymond picks is September 1973, World Cup qualifier, Scotland-Czechoslovakia. Scotland needed to win to qualify for the World Cup for the first time in 16 years. And our boys recovered from giving away a very soft goal, described by TV commentator Arthur Montford as a disaster for Scotland, to beat the team that would just a couple of years later become European champs. There were 100,000 people at Hampden that night, and you can hear it on the highlights. The noise when Holton and Jordan got the 2 goals for Scotland is absolutely deafening. It's like an aircraft taking off. What a game that would have been to attend. So that's what we're looking for, those kind of things. It doesn't have to be Whitecaps related or Canadian soccer related. Just tell us. We have a lot of folk that listen to this show that's not Whitecaps fans. Just what 3 games would you use the TARDIS to go back in time and see? I'd love the TARDIS. I've thought before, like, what if I had the TARDIS, just what periods of history would I love to go back and see? And I'd love to go back to Roman times, maybe Viking times, just stuff like that. It would just be fantastic. But that is it for our news section. We hope you've enjoyed that. We'll be bringing you some more of that soon. So we're going to round off this section now with this week's Wavelength. Now, in the last part, we were talking about Thierry Henry, French legend, and kind of said a perfect fit to take over from him if he was available would be Zinedine Zidane. So let's keep that French theme going. I dug out a song from 2014 from Vaudeville Smash featuring Les Murray. This is a song called Zinedine Zidane.
It's gotta be fun, man. Come on, we can do it. We can come.
In 1972, under a scorching June sun, in the French coastal town of Marseille, 2 Algerian immigrants awaited the birth of their 5th child. Later that day, a star was born. Cristiano Ronaldo, Wayne Rooney, Veron, Suarez, Van Basten, Gianluigi Buffon, Xavi, Iniesta, Drogba, Hazard, Tevez, Schweinsteiger, Steven Gerrard, Alessandro Del Piero, Neymar Forlan, Özil, Nakata, Jean-Pierre Papin, Ballack, Van Persie, Beckham, Giggs, Scholes, but the strongest of them all, Zinedine Zidane. Zinedine Zidane. Superstar. Superstar. Zinedine Zidane. Zinedine Zidane. Superstar. Lionel Messi, Gareth Bale Cure, Nedved Maldini, Aguero Raul, Casillas Cavani, Benzema Mandzukic, Mario Balotelli, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Lothar Matthäus, Shevchenko Cantona, Ronaldinho Ronaldo Romario Rivaldo Robinho Ramirez Kaká, Falcao Frank Ribery, Pirlo Cahill Company, but the strongest of them all, Zinedine Zidane. Zinedine Zidane. Superstar. Superstar. Zinedine Zidane. Zinedine Zidane. Superstar. Superstar. Eusebio, so much more than the world is dreaming of. Beckenbauer, Platini, Best, Charlton, Cruyff, Baggio, Diego Armando Maradona, Pelé. Cannavaro, Karagunis, Chicharito, William Gallas, Sanchez, Mark Bosnich, Hulk, Alexi Lalas, Wilshere, Honda, Busquets, Siki, Simao, Thierry Henry, Modric, Vidal, Patisu, Donovan, Eto'o, Zizou.
Vaudeville Smash featuring Les Murray from 2014 there, Zinedine Zidane. I still find it somewhat bizarre that Zinedine Zidane played a game at Swan Guard.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, no one attended. I watched from the outside on a fence because I wasn't paying money to go and watch that bunch of scrubs.
I don't think
because it promised so much and then it didn't deliver.
I don't think I don't remember paying for my ticket. Did someone? I think
you were actually inside in that.
Oh yeah, I think one of my benevolent friends might have given me a ticket to that. Might have been one of the chaps I mentioned earlier.
I would have gone if I got a free ticket, but I watched from the outside.
I feel terrible that I can't remember. It was hilarious, dude. I don't know if you remember. At one point, he's running. So I was in the bleachers on the, what is that called? The east side of the pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so not the grandstand. But
yeah, that's the bit of the fence I was looking through from that side, actually.
So he's running down the field like he's leading an attack. And he's not that far. He's not on the touchline, but he's like, in that channel. And literally, as he's running, he looks over at the crowd and waves at them. It was like unbelievable. And then I remember I don't forget how they got him out of there because everyone would just stayed. Like, there was not a lot of people there, and they all just stayed waiting for him at the tunnels. And then I don't know if people went to every tunnel. They just went to the tunnel they thought he was going to be at, and they got him at one of the other places or whatever. But
I didn't stay to the end of the game. I thought about it because I thought they'll open the gates and I'll be able to get in and get something signed, but I didn't in the end. The thing for me that really tickled me was one of the players playing in that game, which had been billed as all these big stars coming over, was Damiano Agostini that used to play for East Fife and had been playing in VMSL. And when I tell folk back home that, they're like, what? He was a great player with us there. We had a great song, the Tom Hart Piranha song. It was like, Damiano Agostini, Damiano Agostini.
That's a good song. Yeah. So once again, everyone was there to watch a World Cup winner, and you were there to watch a former Fife player.
Yeah. You can take the boy out of Fife, etc., etc. But that is it for this part. We've got one more part to go this week. We're going to be back talking some Canadian Premier League and salaries after this.
Hi, I'm Marcel de Jong, and you're listening to the AFTN Soccer Show.
He's got his bloodshot eye on your sister, this rebel in rouge, this howling hipster. He's always in the dark, but he knows his way around. He's always talking pish, but he thinks he's so profound. All hail the false enchanter, raise a full cup to the rebel runner. He's got the double horn, leaving all the lovely ladies all love long. And he teases and he toys with dumbstruck boys. We don't stand a fucking chance.
Welcome back to the AFTN Soccer Show on CITR Radio 101.9 FM. And kicking off this part, it's a old favourite band of mine, former Artist of the Month as well, another Scottish band of course, Arab Strap, with a song called Here Comes Comus. It's their new single, the third one taken from their upcoming album, As Days Get Dark. It's out on March 5th. It's their 7th studio album, but their first one since 2005. Really looking forward to that. It should be an absolute cracker. But for this final part of the show, we're going to turn our attentions back to Canada and to the Canadian Premier League. I'd hoped to kind of chat about this before, but last week's show was obviously a bumper 3-hour show, so this was one of the parts that we actually had to cut out. But before we get into the main thing I want to talk about here, great news. The Canadian Players Football Association has been accepted into the ranks of FIFPro this week. They attended the virtual FIFPro conference and they've been accepted into that now. Great step forward for the union and just legitimises them, really, considering the fact that the leagues still have not officially recognised them and entered into regular chats with them. Great step forward for them, Zach.
Totally, it is. Does FIFPro have any way to expedite that process or to put pressure on the league or FIFA or through the CSA?
I don't really think officially they do, but the pressure's ramped up because they are officially recognised.
Yeah.
They're in with the MLSPA, we're in with the English PFA and stuff like that, and it still baffles me, and we've talked about reasons possibly why the league are not wanting to really recognise them, and I kind of feel it's inevitable that it's going to happen, and you just want them to do it before it maybe goes to the courts and they do get forced to do it.
Yeah, it can't go that route. That would be bad.
It'd be very bad in the current financial climate you have to feel that the league is operating under as well. And what we want to talk about for the rest of this part is that there's been a couple of articles written about this recently. Dwayne Rollins was one of the first guys to do it in his 24th minute newsletter that he's doing now. And he's pieced this together by speaking to a number of players and people around the league. So I'm not saying it's 100% accurate. So you still take these figures as what they were. People talking to Dwayne about it, but from things that I've also heard, then things tie up, and other people have heard this as well, and Northern Tribune's done an article about this, and the unions talked a little bit about some of these things as well, and this is all around players' salaries in the CPL. Now, we've talked a lot already this year about players' salaries in Major League Soccer, etc., etc. Now, the breakdown that Dwayne gives for player salaries in the Canadian Premier League are as follows. If you're a U Sport player, you get $10,000 a year. A domestic rookie, $10,000 to $12,500. A player with some previous professional experience, $15,000 to $20,000. An established player, $18,000 to $25,000. Again, you could maybe wonder what is classed as established. Star domestic player, $30,000 to $35,000. Again, what classes as a star domestic player? Marco Bustos potentially. Ben Fisk potentially. International player, $35,000 plus housing. Now, let's just let those figures kind of sink in a little bit with you at home. And as that happens, let's just get your initial thoughts on those figures, Zach, from what you've previously heard as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard about some of the U Sport contracts being low. I think I can't remember if this is exactly what I'd heard or it was in that range. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, some of those aren't exactly what I'd heard, but again, definitely in the range.
I'm a little surprised. Like this is not a max, right? Because there's got to be someone making more than $35,000.
I would think so.
Yeah. So It's interesting to hear that they also get housing, considering we know what an interesting topic that's been in connection to the league over the 2-3 years. The things have been in conversation.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's players that we know throughout the league that are sharing a house with other players. I think, like when we spoke to Ben Fisk last year, I think he was in a house with 3 Ottawa players.
Yeah.
Other teams I know, there's been like 4 to 6 players sharing accommodation, mainly the young guys that's on teams. It's the only way that it's really affordable to them.
Totally.
It's quite scary figures, really, when you think places like Victoria, not a cheap place to live.
No.
Hamilton, that area, York, not cheap places to live.
No, not at all. Yeah, you wonder how they're getting by, and we know that some of them are not getting by.
Well, I mean, there's been a couple of players recently that's decided to quit because they want to focus on other careers, sensibly, in my opinion, if that's what they're getting. Because the other part about these figures coming out is these amounts are paid to them while the season is on. So if you kind of say April to October, and out with that, they have to claim EI.
Yeah, that's weird.
Or obviously they can get a loan deal somewhere in Europe and get paid there. I guess for a lot of guys in the CPL, it's their first experience of a professional contract. So they're happy to take anything initially.
Yeah.
Because they want to... It's the risk versus reward, I guess.
Yeah.
You're taking that gamble on yourself. You're betting on yourself. We talked about that with Erik Hurtado in part 2. You're betting on yourself to play out your skin and get a better contract either in the league, in MLS, or a deal overseas. That is what you're betting on.
And I think too, like, I see the both sides to all this, right? Like the league is supposed to be a place where Canadians who never had a chance to play have the opportunity to play in Canada and to further develop their game or further their career or end their career, whatever. It has to be concerning that I'm going to probably mess up the names here, but 2 of the players who have quote unquote retired are guys who I think most people think have upside, right? Lucas Gasparotto is one, right? The center back from York.
Oh, he's a third one then.
Oh, and then Dylan Carrera?
Yeah, and there was another one this morning that I've been trying to, for the life of me, find the tweet. I can't remember who it is or what team he played for, but it was somebody that had made 30 appearances in CPL so far.
Lucas Gasparotto, I think, has more than the ability to play this level, like for sure. And Dylan Carrero, he was from Valor, right? And I heard people speak very highly of him. I think his family had a good relationship with the supporters in the province of Manitoba. But so like that's concern, like that should be concerning. And that is why, like, this is another, if you're an outside, I dare I say, objective observer, you look at something like that, and that should probably tell you, like they need to have, players need to have a union. Players need to have a say in some of the things that are going into their contracts and their abilities on what they can make. It's concerning. But then the other side of the coin is we know that some of the owners, anyways, are not super deep pocketed, or they have limited funds, as in thinking about Winnipeg, Valor with them being owned by the trust that runs the pigskin team and stuff. Not that their pockets don't have some depth to them, but they're not deep in the way we would traditionally think about football clubs. And so it's all a little bit concerning because, it's all a little bit concerning for me because the long-term hope is for this to be a self-sustaining, healthy, developing, growing football league that makes sense in all that checks all the boxes: the development one, the financial one for the clubs, for the players, for everyone around it. And we're seeing some of the growing pains, if you will, or I guess growing pains is probably the best way to put it.
See, I understand in a lot of ways. Like, the money is not in the league right now. And you look at something like, if a U Sport player is getting 10,000, you can say, well, he is still a college player. He hasn't signed a pro deal. He's going back to college. It's just some summer job money. But you look at some of these other figures and you have to think, how are you going to attract the quality that you want into the league? How are you going to attract Canadian players that are overplaying in Europe back to the league? Now, not all leagues play well. We heard that Bjorn Jonsson saying that in Portugal he was getting a crap amount of money, but then in Bulgaria they offered him a ton of money. So some leagues in Europe are paying good money. The thing with me is, you've got to give people a standard of living, and you've got to give people a living wage, something that you're not taking advantage of. It still smacks of like they're saying, well, it's the philanthropic side. It's we're giving you guys a league to call your own, a league to play in. If that's what they're getting, then it's not ideal. I spoke to a Canadian player that got offered a deal in USL. I won't say who it was or what the club was, but it was the amount that he was offered. Can't remember if it was 35 or 38,000 American. And he turned it down because he said, the standard of living, I can't afford that. And I mean, if you're talking, say, 35 American, that's like, 45 to 50 Canadian? That's still way more than your highest payer in those things. So no wonder Canadians are still choosing to go and play in USL, because they're still getting a higher wage than they would get by far in the CPL.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. These two or three examples show us that they're going to lose some of their most potentially talented players because they're not paying them enough. And that's a problem. Again, I'm not saying the immediate answer is everyone should get more money, but it is something the league, if they don't recognize, they need to recognize, and they need to be charting a pathway forward that makes sense for them and is going to enable them to actually achieve what they're longing to achieve.
I don't know if the long-term thinking is that, look, we know there's always going to be people that are going to play in this league, but again, it boils down to, I want this league to succeed. So obviously you can't go splashing money about left, right and centre in the early days, especially during a pandemic. I totally get that. And I totally get why you're wanting to keep salaries a little bit low. But to grow this league, you have to grow people's enthusiasm for it, people's excitement for it. And by people, I'm not meaning the hardcore fans that are already into it. Your general footballing public, your TFC fans, your Whitecaps fans, your Montreal fans that don't watch those teams just now but just like football. All those kind of things is all those kind of people is who you're needing to attract. And if you haven't got the quality playing in that league, you're not going to attract them in the numbers that you want. You're not going to get the one soccer subscription that they need to keep that as a going concern. You're not going to get the TV deals. It's a vicious circle, really. But those figures stunned me a little bit. Not as much because of murmurs that I've heard, but some of them definitely stunned me. But as you said, there's got to be some players in the league that's on way more than that maximum 35,000.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, another offshoot of this is then how because we know how it was in MLS locker rooms when the salaries got announced, and there was
this is probably why they're not releasing the salaries publicly, of course.
Which is something you think a union would change.
Yes, I'm sure they would be certainly pushing for that. It's horrible to see, but I don't see any way out of it right now because the money's just simply not there. That's the thing. The money is not in the game in this country unless you've got some really, really big name businessmen that are prepared to lose a lot of money. I don't see this changing anytime soon. And I've enjoyed the CPL and the quality of it. I still think it is good quality. You want to keep the players there. You've seen how many players have gone to Europe on loan. Some of them are meant to be coming back. Some of them might not come back. Once these guys get a taste over there and speak to players over there and see what the salaries are like over there, it's going to be tough to keep players in this league for more than 2 years.
Yeah, because I remember even MLS players. Well, let's not use names. So I remember MLS players being like back to year one in MLS, where there was a number of internationals came in. And I remember some of them, and they were getting criticized for their MLS salary. And they were like, this is like nothing compared to what you make in Europe. Like what I'm making here, I don't understand how people are complaining about what I'm making. Like, sure, I know I'm not contributing maybe as much as I would like, and I've had injuries or whatever the circumstances were, but they were like, are you kidding me? Like my wage here is nothing. And it's not. That wasn't at the upper end of the scale.
It's like that's how you've struggled to bring back North American players that are playing in Europe back to MLS. It's just they can get so much more. There's the balance of, do you want to be at home? Not everybody, not every young guy wants to leave his family and friends and go and play in Europe, but they do want to play football. So you've got to get a happy medium. I just hope something changes, that these guys get a lot more, because we've all heard stories, I'm sure, anyone that knows players that are in the CPL, of players getting mucked around with contracts, players not having bonuses paid that they were promised, players finding out what another teammate is actually on and going, how come he's on that and I'm contributing all this and I'm not on that? So, yep, there's a lot still to be ironed out. Just wanted to have a little bit of chat about that in this show. The Canada Players Football Association Union are wanting to get all the Canadian international players involved in this union as well. Now, we've talked about players getting released for international duty and how the Whitecaps are going to get hit hard by Canadian players in particular getting called up for international duty throughout this year. Now, you look at the She Believes Cup and you'll see that there was a number of European-based female players that weren't released for Canada because they're playing in Europe just now because of the pandemic, and FIFA have it that, if it's more than 7 days quarantine, clubs don't have to release their players, even if it's during a FIFA window. Something I found out this week is a number of American players that are playing in Europe have it written into their contract that they have to get released for international duty no matter what. Now, a Canadian player was asked if they had that in their contract, and they were like, no, I didn't know that was something you could do. That's where a union would be really handy and benefit the player in that regard.
Absolutely. That reminds me of Erik Astley. When he came here, he didn't know, because the system is so different in MLS than to Europe, that you could have a no trade clause put in your contract as a designated player, because he was used to a system where the player have to agree to whatever the move is. And so, we've told this story before, but when he found out that was the reality, he requested that, and of course they denied it to him because they, from the get-go, had told Martin Rennie that you can get rid of Erik Astley and Davide Cumento and bring in your replacements, which were Kenny Miller and Barry Robson. Yeah. Kenny is a quality dude. I really appreciate Kenny Miller. He was very generous with his time.
He was undervalued here, I believe. Yeah. And it'd be good to actually catch up with him, see how he's doing down in Oz and being assistant to Carroll and moving about between the clubs down there and stuff like that. Yeah, we'll maybe reach out to Kenny, see if he wants to come on the show. I still love to get Carroll on the show, but we'll see. See if you can work your magic on that if you're still in touch with him.
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day. But that is it for this episode of the AFTN Soccer Show. Thank you for listening all the way through again. We'll be back soon. But before that, just let everyone know where they can find you online, Zach.
For me, it's at Zachary AM on Twitter, although I haven't been checking in there lately. That's where you can find me when I am on Twitter.
You can get me on Twitter at AFTN Canada. Read our stuff away from the numbers, aftn.ca. Give us a follow on Instagram, AFTN Soccer. And please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Turn on notifications as well if you want. youtube.com/AFTN Canada. We have got a number of video series planned this year. Some fun ones. We're going to have some quizzes. We're going to be doing our footballing board game that we're going to be planning for a while, that the pandemic kind of put the kibosh in, but trying to see if we can get something set up for that, and a few other fun things as well. And if you're not a subscriber to our AFTN Extra podcasts, please consider doing that. I know times are hard for many of us just now. It's $30 a year, $3 a month. You get all the details on aftn.ca. You'll get quality extra podcasts delivered to your mailbox, and you're supporting AFTN at the same time. But we'll be back next week with more football chat, and I've got a couple of fun interviews hopefully lined up for this week. Until then, thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and mon the Caps.
Going to your first match is an experience you never forget. The atmosphere of what's going on around the pitch looks beautiful, and you always look and go, wow, I'd love to play here one day. If you get the bug, it's going to stay with you for life.
10 minutes left. Yeah, but there's still some time. It's not the final score. We need more than the numbers we're given. Show us you live and breathe the game. You're more than a name. That's what we came for. We can bring you more than the score. Every story. Let's take this thing off of the field into the real world, away from the numbers, away from the numbers.